Genesis, how he took care of Joseph. Come on, help me in here, somebody. You ought to know even right now that Joseph knew how good God was. And I'm telling you to check his track record today. You ought to look back over your situation. And you ought to look to see how you made it. Let me help you here. Let me help you here. Grandmama now said it like this, said he made a way out of no way. Grandmama damn didn't have a whole lot of education. But one thing they were real smart of is that when they hit a hardship and a rock in a hard place, they didn't have to call nobody. All they had to do was call on the name of Jesus. You ought to check God's track record of some people he delivered out of abundance. That's why we can't move right now. That's why we can't praise it right now. Because a whole lot of us are still in bondage. But you need to be delivered today. And if you want deliverance, you ought to lift your hands in here and say, God, I'm going to check your track record. Can you say yes in here? I got to get ready to leave. I got to get ready to leave. I got to get ready to leave. But before I go, I want to go old school like the old preacher used to do back in the country, when they call a few witnesses to testify to how good God has been to them. Can you say yes in here? If I had to call a witness, I'll call one right now. I'll say, come here, Daniel. Can you testify to the fact? And Daniel says, sure, Anthony, I'll testify on your behalf. I remember when I was just trying to get a prayer through, and they saw me through my window. I was minding my own business, and I got put in the line then. But I tell you, when I check God's track record, I can understand that he brought me out. They put me in the lines then. When I sat in the line then, I had to use one lion for a pillar. I had to use one lion for my feet to prop up on them. And I used another lion just to remind me that I wasn't supposed to be down there with them. Can you say yes in here? In other words, now you had to make a 3-size king bed. You had to make a queen-size bed out of the animals. Can you say yes in here? You ought to help somebody here tonight. Even right now this morning, you ought to help somebody here and begin to tell your neighbor, say, neighbor, you got to check God's track record. If you check God's track record, you'll discover that he brought somebody else out. And if he brought somebody else out, then he sure can bring you out. Can you say yes in here? I feel my preaching coming on. If I had to call another witness, I called the lady who had an issue of blood for 12 years. I said, come here, ma'am. Can you testify that God will bring you out? And the lady said, sure, Anthony, I'll testify for you. I had an issue of blood for 12 long years. I went to every doctor. I went around to every place. And the doctors couldn't help me. But I had to call on the name of Jesus. And when I called on the name of Jesus, he was in town one day. And I had to press my way through the crowd. I had to press my way through the opposition. And when I touched just a hem of his garment, I was made whole. And he brought me out of that thing. And he brought anybody else out. I was had to call another witness. I'll call 3 this time, no Corey. I'll call 3 witnesses who had to go in the fiery furnace. You know, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Can you say yes in here? I said, listen, boys, I need y'all to do something. What do you need, Pastor? I need y'all to testify for me that God will bring you out. Can you tell Nehemiah about God's track record? And the boys will tell you, say, yeah, they put us in the fiery furnace and they turned it up 7 times hotter. But we kept believing that God was going to bring us out. We never stopped trusting that God was going to deliver us. break. He said, hold on. I put 3, but it looked like 4. Hold on, 1, 2, 3. But why is 4 in there? And he said, the 4th one looked like the Son of Man. I wish I had some help in here. You ought to look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, he'll deliver you. He'll bring you out whatever you're going through. I wish I had some help in here. And so the 3 Hebrew boys and said, now listen, Pastor, we didn't know whether he was going to bring us out or not, but we trusted him to do it anyway. And he brought us out. He brought us out. Can you say yeah? I got to go right here. But I got one more thing to tell you. I had to call on another witness. I called on the children of Israel when they were at the Red Sea. The Red Sea was before, and Pharaoh's army was behind. But let's check God's track record. God said, if you follow my plan, I'll show you how to make it through your situation. And so when the children of Israel was at the Red Sea, they had to look back to see the problem, and they had to look ahead and they saw another problem. But how many know that God has a hate? He has a killer eye. That's what y'all say. That means good. He has a good track record. Can you say yes in here? He got a track record that don't want it. Every now and then, you gotta check God's resume. You ought to see what he's done before. And when he opened up the Red Sea and they walked over on dry land, look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, have you checked God's track record lately? Can you say yes in here? If you know he's been good to you, why don't you wave your hand? If you know he brought you out, why don't you give God a praise? I got one. I got one last witness. And I want to call to the stand. And I call this witness to the stand. You ought to be on your feet. Because I want to call Jesus to the stand. And say, Jesus, when you check your daddy's track record, you know he was going to bring you out. Jesus said, I knew he was going to bring me out, but I had to show my people that he can do. Look over at your neighbor and say, neighbor, every now and then, you got to check God's track record. When you check God's track record, you'll see that he'll bring you out. Whatever problem you have, he'll fix it for you. And you say, yes, in here. If I got anybody in here, know that's what Jesus, he looked back over his life. He was in the barroom for 3 long days. But then, one Sunday morning, he got up with all power in his hand. And I want to tell you here now that if he did it then, he can do it right now. If he brought him out then, he can bring you out now. If he helped you then, he can help you right now. Look at somebody and say every now and then, you want to check God's track record. Because his track record is that he'll bring you out. When it looks like you can't come out, he'll bring you through. When it looks like you can't come through, can you say yes in here? With somebody who knows what it is to come out of a situation. If you know he's been good for you, will you give God some praise in here? Will you give him some praise?